Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Mike Peterson, and I'm the founder of Science and Design, which is this fun little platform called Science and Design that helps the interior design industry realize its role as an alternative health resource. That's what science says. That's not me saying it. That's what neuroscientists around the world feel. That's how they feel, and that's what they say about our industry. Now, before we get started with the main event, what I want to do is make a few announcements to let everybody know about some things coming up. So let me share my screen real, whoops. Okay, upcoming webinars on September 10th. We'll be joined by Kay Sargent, Director of Thought Leadership Interiors at HOK. She's a renowned advocate for neuro-inclusive design. She's authored her book, Designing Neuro-Inclusive Workplaces, and has testified before the U.S. Congress on the built environment. We'll be talking about case studies and the application of sciences, which will provide rich content for all attendees. The next webinar is October 8th, and it's applying neuroaesthetics and biophilia in your design process. If you remember, I've been asking science and design certified designers to send me examples of projects where they've used the filters of neuroaesthetics and biophilia in their project. And so we're going to be led by Kirsten Stahl out of Savannah, Nina Lichtenstein, Janine Arrieta, Claudette Rowley, and Samantha Smith. And these will be real world case studies, and they'll demonstrate how neuroaesthetics and biophilic design principles are applied in environments. Big news, big news. October High Point Market. Here are reasons to come to market, even if you're wavering on that. On Saturday afternoon, we're pretty much owning the market, science and design is. At 1 o'clock, we have a special panel, Designing for Human Health, the Power of Industry Collaboration. And we have Mark Phillips, the chairman of Phillips Collection, Ryan Rancino, vice president of sales at Christorama, Janet Marina of JTM Interiors in California, and Jenna Jacobs Freeman out of Atlanta to talk about how designers and manufacturers should be working together to get this message out and to produce the right kind of product. At 2 o'clock, we have NeuroArts, the impact of art on our minds and bodies. And this team of designers, artists, that you'll hear from today will be on hand. You can meet them personally. They will also be displaying their artwork there on the stage at the Suites at Market Square. And at 3 o'clock, this is one of the subjects that I get a lot, questions a lot from you. And that is, okay, now I have the knowledge of neuroaesthetics. How do I talk about it? How do I market it? So I'm pulling in Erica Sort of Sort Creative and Jennifer Smiga of Ultraviolet Agency, which is my digital agency. And they're going to be talking about helping you market and promote and message your business. And we're not done yet. On Monday, October 19th at 11 a.m., we'll conduct a special seminar at 313 building. Jane Dagme from the High Point by Design will moderate, and will bring back the October designers, all science and design certified, to present their products once more at High Point Market. Lastly, on Monday at 2 o'clock, in the Christorama showroom, Sydney Hodnett, the executive editor of the Furniture Today series, will bring together Kat Blue, Marie Cloud, Nina Lichtenstein, and Jenna Jacobs Freeman to talk about how neuroaesthetics and salutogenic design are reshaping residential design. Now, I have to talk about this because this is exploding. Why are so many designers enrolling in the science and design certification? It's because of terms like neuroaesthetics, biophilia, salutogenic design are becoming more widely used. And it's more important than ever to ensure that you are grounded in credible research and that you can apply with integrity, and that you feel comfortable in using the new language of design. It's 22 classes, it's self-paced, it's online, And more importantly, it's taught by academics and scholars from Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics, Boston Architectural College, Universities of Oregon and Texas, and more. It's also attracting a lot of non-designer people. Jason Phillips, the CEO of Phillips Collection, enrolled and just completed the class. Cindy Hodnett, that editor I was talking to you about, is taking the class. Ryan Rancino from Christorama is taking the class. We now have artists taking the class. Trisha, that you'll hear from today, is a graduate of the class. We have realtors. Now, at our webinar earlier this week, we announced a special incentive. An incentive of $100 when you use the code SID100. And that code is good through the end of this month. So if you like what you're hearing today and you like what you see with science and design, please become one of the early adopters and let's change the industry. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is ask our artists to introduce themselves. And while they're doing that, I'm going to be showing you some of their work so you can get a feel for what they do. Roxanne, do you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you so much, Mike, for inviting me to be here today. I'm going to read my intro. I'm Roxanne Darling. I have a Bachelor of Science degree from UC Berkeley in marine biology, which I abandoned to join a ballet company. I was first to teach mind-body fitness in the 80s and then became a corporate health coach for Johnson & Johnson. My interest in making art emerged after caring for my mom, herself an artist. After her death, nature spoke to me repeatedly on a 2-month camping trip, and that led to an award-winning self-portrait and poetry art collection. I began co-creating abstract biophilic photography in 2016 when my partner and I were awarded a 16-piece commission and art gallery at the Andaz Maui Resort. I'm also a forest bathing guide. My artwork is abstract photography made in the camera by painting with light and movement. This captures what Hawaiians call naka, the inner vibrational state of the plants, which cannot be seen by the human eye. I offer my photographs, which look more like paintings, as editions of one that can be sized and fabricated to the designer's exact specifications. Thank you for having me, Mike.
Now, I want everybody to notice that we have 3 different artists here using, though, nature as their source. And wait till you see how the different styles of art are performed. Jenny?
Everyone, I'm Jenny Fisher, and I'm tuning in here from Asheville, North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains. I am a visual fine artist. I am also the founder of Jenny Fisher Designs, which I recently launched this year. I have many years in the arts industry as a educator. I was a professor of art with Western Carolina University. And I've also worked at the middle school and high school levels with neurospicy children, which I love to call, I love that term, that Erica McLean coined. But my work is very biophilic. I'm really inspired by the Blue Ridge Mountains here. And all of my work is inspired. I use real plants and flowers and textures to create my pieces. I have some that are graphite texture rubbings of ancient stone surfaces, and then I also have some botanical compositions that where I use a lot of the native plants and flowers I find here. And so I'm very excited to be here. My passion really is to inspire others with my art and my story. And, with Jenny Fisher Designs, I really, my mission is to promote health and well-being. And, by integrating nature-inspired art into interior spaces. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Trisha?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Trisha. By profession, I've actually been a critical care pharmacist for 16 years and also most recently the director of our pharmacy residency program at Penn Medicine, Chester County Hospital. So I'm a self-taught artist. I've been an artist my whole life, but really decided to start pursuing art more professionally about 6 years ago. I've licensed my art with several home decor companies, and then most recently just focusing on custom wall coverings. So my wall coverings are all starting with hand-drawn, hand-painted designs, and really to weave in storytelling. It's kind of the heart of my brand. All of my wall coverings are manufactured through my own brand, and really just partner with interior designers as well as homeowners. So for a long time, my two worlds in healthcare and in art were very separate until I met Mike and Science and Design and became certified in neuroaesthetics. And it's really has been just the bridge that I've been looking for. And now I feel like it's just been able to allow me to create art with more intention, being able to weave in some of the principles of neuroaesthetics into my art. And I'm just excited to be here, to be able to be a part of this discussion, educate everybody on really what the power of art can be for our spaces. And I'm just hoping that everybody, I equally agrees at the end of this discussion that there is far more power to art than I think we realize. So thank you so much, Mike, for having me.
All right, thank you. Thank you, all three of you. All right, so let's get started. First question, Daisy Fancourt, the author of the new book, Art Cure, says the arts have a profound effect on our mental and physical health, both on the prevention of problems, but also in managing and treating symptoms. Can Jenny, can you speak to what she's talking about?
Absolutely. NeuroArts, in particular is what we're going to be speaking about, which is, the intersection of neuroscience, art, and design. And engaging with the arts, whether you are looking at a piece of work, artwork that moves you or, speaks to you in some manner, or whether you're actually creating and making art yourself, it has very similar physiological and mental benefits as being in nature. And it's, you have reduced blood pressure, your cortisol levels drop and your stress hormones drop. And so it's, you're getting those nice, yummy neurochemicals that make you feel good. If, for example, if your body is reacting physiologically, as well as mentally, and you're getting a hit of dopamine when you see a work of art that really moves you, or even, another example can be if you're with music, even, we're talking about visual art, but music, if you're driving in your car and you hear, great song or something that really, your favorite tune that really gets you pumped up, you're getting a body high basically from your neurochemicals. And so an art works very much in the same manner. So
yeah, as a health person,
Go ahead,
previous
Roxanne.
background in health, if I may, one of the things I loved that Daisy said in her book is she's lobbying to make art engagement the fifth pillar of health after sleep, diet, nutrition, and nature. Sleep, diet, exercise, and nature. And I like to think there are so many studies. Her book covers one of the main ones from the World Health Organization that published her research. And when we think of health, most people run away from health. It's hard to lose weight. It's hard to quit smoking. It's hard to go to therapy. But we, by putting art in our spaces, can encourage people to basically microdose art all day long in their spaces. And it's so much easier and it's so much more accessible.
All right, all right. So let me ask you, maybe Trisha this time. What studies have you found that support art being beneficial to the mind and body?
Happy to. So I think in search of the literature and really broadly researching, what type of studies have been performed, I was looking for studies that were on various forms of art in different settings. And it certainly is a challenge. There's an opportunity here for us to do more research, but In the studies that we do have available, many of them were conducted in healthcare spaces, which I think is equally important. But I think it's phenomenal that we have healthcare spaces that are able to show how art can be very powerful. So I preface this by saying that just because we have those studies in those spaces doesn't necessarily mean that art can't impact us in everyday living spaces or in different forms than just the visual art. We just need more studies. But before I actually kind of dive into one of the studies, I did want to share a quote. And I think this was kind of profound. But when I came across this quote, it was by Florence Nightingale. So she wrote this in 1859, and she has been considered the founder of modern nursing. So she wrote, people say that the effect is only on the mind. It is no such thing. The effect is on the body too. Little as we know about the way in which we are affected by form, by color, and light, we do know this, that they have an actual physical effect. The variety of form and brilliance of color and the objects presented to patients are actually means of recovery. And I thought that was fascinating. So 167 years ago, someone was making an observation that there are components in our environment that are affecting our patients. And I think it's also what's greatly supporting why we are seeing a lot of studies in healthcare spaces. So one of the first studies that I came across was by Dr. Upali Nanda. She is a leading researcher in evidence-based healthcare design. She spends a lot of her career studying how the environment affects patient outcomes, and she performed a study in a psychiatric unit. Just by simply looking at realistic nature art being placed on walls, she was able to prove that we could have a reduction in the amount of medication a patient would need for anxiety and agitation by nearly 60%, which is phenomenal. I think for me personally, as being a pharmacist, one of the absolute duties of the pharmacist is to promote safety and ensure no harm. And sometimes that is really just trying to reduce medication usage. So I think if we can say that just the art on our walls is able to produce such a profound effect in patients, I think it's incredible. Something definitely to be said, right, about doing things other than just medicine. And then there's one more study that I want to just quickly touch on, and it was conducted actually by, it was more of a critical review, I should say, of synthesizing 25 different experimental studies. This was done by Dr. Anjan Chaudhary's group, and he is the director of the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics at the University of Pennsylvania. So in this review, it was, again, 25 studies that were healthcare based in a lot of the ambulatory care clinics, living facilities, assisted living facilities. They looked at many different types of art. There's realistic nature imagery. There's a mix of the two. But what they specifically were looking at was what was patients' response to visual arts on the wall. And they found there was a direct link to reduction in stress and pain and anxiety, more promising results with nature-based art. But even still, again, so many studies that have been able to have consistent results with just nature-based art. So, many other studies out there that I think are available to us. I just think that some of these were probably the strongest. And I certainly think that there's an opportunity, again, to do more research in our everyday spaces. But hopefully by the end of today's discussion, everybody will also be able to take away that we may not need so many studies. I think the benefit is really obvious.
Trisha, a couple of things to unpack there. We're getting a question from around the world from Bettina. Can you send me the data on those studies?
Yeah.
Because I send a follow-up email the next morning, like tomorrow morning, I'll be sending it. And I think the attendees would really like to have access to those studies. A couple of other things. You mentioned Upali. Upali is going to be speaking at a special event at the Catholic University in Washington, D.C. in early November. It's the 100th anniversary of Gaudí, and they're going to be celebrating the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. And the architect of the church is going to be speaking. He's the keynote speaker. So it's going to be very exciting. I'm sending out a memo in a couple of days to all of the followers of science and design, because I would love it if we had a great crowd there. The second thing is, you mentioned Dr. Chatterjee. He's my keynote presenter in our certification program. He is the king of neuroaesthetics in the world. So you can learn from Anjan. He's brilliant. Can
I add one little comment?
Yes, please, Roxanne, go ahead.
Early on, I think it's helpful to note a lot of the research is parallel track with biophilic design and other neuroaesthetic research in that viewing art activates the default mode network in the brain, which activates our parasympathetic nervous system. So when we have art, especially nature-themed art, there's this magnifier effect going on. And that's sort of the mechanism for the science geeks in the room of what's going on in these studies that we're all going to be citing today. Thanks.
Yeah, and one other thing, since we're talking about these studies and we're talking about the impact of nature, one of our other faculty members on the program is Dr. Richard Taylor out of the University of Oregon. And Richard, a dear friend of science and design, and he is a fractal fluency specialist. And he has documented that fractals can lower stress levels by up to 60%. And it's no longer, we're wondering if we just make people feel better. It is now documented. So just let's keep that in our toolbox. All right, let's talk to the idea that NeuroArts is more. I think this is pretty important because we spend most of our time looking at things. Talk to the fact that NeuroArts is more than just a visual activity. That art and aesthetics include all of the senses. Jenny, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, and particularly my artwork is very sensory based, very tactile. A lot of my research and information that I'll be talking about comes from Your Brain on Art, which was written by Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross, who have done extensive studies on the NeuroArts. And, they both speak about core concepts of NeuroArts. And really what lies at the heart of it is understanding the senses and how we take in sensory stimuli. We are basically, taking in information through our bodies and our five senses, million bits of sensory information is coming at us right now, actually. For instance, what are you feeling in the surfaces around you, right? How do you have a smooth desk? Do you have a nubby chair? Do you have a furry blanket that you're kind of, cuddled up in? What you're seeing visually as well as your other senses. And these are all to say that this is your brain taking it in. Most of it is at a subconscious level and, before it and bodily, before it registers in our mind, in our brain. But sensory perception is, again, that taking in this a physiological and psychological reaction to art and what it does to your body. It's engaging your neuroplasticity in, which is one of the core concepts spoken in Your Brain on Art, but it's basically you are not only when you're looking at works of art and creating works of art, your brain is literally rewiring itself and it is increasing those connections, those neural connections that are improving your learning outcomes. It's creating memorable connections that you will long-term memories. And so when, and a lot of times what's interesting is when you're looking at artwork, you don't necessarily understand all these things that are happening. It's all happening at below the surface, really. It's just, something that moves you for some reason and you don't know why, right? But I think sense of touch in particular, for me, is very much at the heart of what I make. I'm a very tactile artist. What I do is I create hand embossed graphite rubbings of historic surfaces. So a lot of some of those surfaces are here in the mountains. I go on hikes and I find cliffs and rocky outcrops that have really interesting organic textures to them, in these amazing fractal patterns that I see. And a lot of times it's not always visible to the eye until I start creating my rubbing with the graphite, and then it really starts picking up these fine details and these rhythms, these organic rhythms that really are quite beautiful. And it's interesting for me personally. I guess I am kind of my own guinea pig in that regard of how the senses are and art are helping, because when I am doing these rubbings, it's very meditative to me. I really am just it helps me to just kind of, clear my mind. And it's very, I don't know, it's a lot of signals and associations are coming. And I know oxytocin is one of the neurochemicals that is released when, through sense of touch. And actually touch is one of the most powerful senses that creates some of the most powerful connections, right? In compared.
Super.
But yeah, my rubbings for me personally are, it's like I'm being stimulated visually and through that tactile perception. And then I also like I'm able to bring that to my viewer through my artwork. And, in the way that I'm capturing botanical motifs and these branching structures and fractals in the natural surfaces. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, we're getting a lot of nice comments on that too. I have another question, and it's kind of really important to me because in what I've learned, the whole idea of our evolutionary inheritance is really, really important to understand who we are today. So let's specifically tie it to art. Why is understanding our evolutionary inheritance important to an appreciation of art? And Roxanne, do you want to take that?
I will try. Yes.
Big
Often
subject.
with this question, people often start with this notion of the savannah, that very long time ago, when we lived on the savannah offered what the patterns of biophilic design number 11 call prospect, when we can look out in a distance and see that there are no threats, then our bodies calm down. So this is one of the reasons why landscape art is so popular. It's one of the highest selling forms of art. But any line, any horizontal line has a calming effect. There are researchers at University of Toronto who took photographs and they stripped out all the texture and the color, and they had people view the photographs just basically looking at the lines in the artwork. And when the artwork had horizontal lines, which we see in famous, abstract artists as well, Rothko and so forth, they had a more positive physiological response versus if there was a lot of vertical and chaotic and sharp lines, then they perceived that as threat. So we have research that art historians have done for a long time now being updated with neuroaesthetics. We've mentioned Dr. Chatterjee several times, but his book, The Aesthetic Triad, he talks about how beauty is a biological necessity because our bodies are drawn to things that are beautiful because they feel safe. That's the 12th pattern of biophilic design, refuge, creating a safe space and being able to immerse yourself. Slow looking is the new term he's talking about. Looking at art generates these physiological parasympathetic stress reducing results for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in our regular presentation, I have a couple of slides. One slide of a picture from inside a cave, safe and protected, but with a view to the rest of the world. And right next to that, I have an image of a window seat with a view out the window. And it's an evolutionary inheritance that view out the window is so important to us. And by the way, Bill Browning, another one of our faculty members, talked at Terrapin Bright Green, talks about biomorphic shapes and how important they are to reflect and replicate and in our homes. So just another thought for everyone. Okay, here's a softball. Why is nature-based art so beneficial to the human being? And since all of you are nature-based art, this should be right in your wheelhouse. Trisha, do you want to start?
Just realized I was on mute, so sorry about that. So I think Roxanne touched a little bit on this as well, and of course Jenny. But when thinking, I think just about nature-based art and its benefit, we may not, aside from the studies that we've already kind of reviewed and have been already conducted at looking specifically at visual art that's nature-based, I think we can also fall back on just the principles of neuroaesthetics. And I think when I was going through the neuroaesthetic course and certification course, I was really viewing it from the lens of an artist, of course, and taking away, where art fit in. And I think literally art can be in any of the principles that are reviewed in the certification course. But I'm going to touch on just a couple of them for sake of time. So first one that even Roxanne mentioned is biophilia. That is our innate and evolutionary pull towards nature and living things. So within our human history, we have developed in that natural world. It is what we are going to be most affected by. So, when we think about what type of art's going to come on our walls, and that's going to have the most physiologic, benefit to us, it's going to be nature-based, purely because of these principles in biophilia. And biophilia can be incorporated into our spaces many different ways, with the natural form, the real thing with plant life. And I think where art does fit in is when you can't bring that in, when you can't bring in the real thing, you don't have that window to view nature in its, purest form. I absolutely think art can be kind of, that replacement, for when we can't do that. The other is fractals. So we've already mentioned that nature is built on fractals. They are those self-similar patterns in nature that repeat at different scales. And without even thinking about it, it's all around you. You probably haven't noticed it. It's in the ferns, it's in your branching trees, the coastlines. So what research has already proven is that our visual system has evolved to process all of those fractals effortlessly. And when we are visualizing those fractals and reviewing them, it reduces physiologic stress. So again, if we've already, have that data to support that, then those fractals can absolutely be brought into our artwork. And it should be one of those intentional decisions that we're making, right? When we're trying to choose art for our walls, perhaps lean into some of these principles with biophilia and the fractals. The last one, that I'll kind of talk about here is the sense of awe, which we haven't really touched on just yet. It is a principle of neuroaesthetics, and it is basically that response that we have to something that is vast and beautiful and larger than ourselves. I think everybody's experienced this at some point, and you can just kind of think of when you've walked into maybe is it a hotel, is it a community space where you've seen this amazing piece of art and it's allowed you to pause, right? Allowed you to feel that emotion of awe. Again, this has already been proven to be directly associated with creating a calmer physiologic state. So creating more art that can provide this type of feeling in people who are viewing it, and I think it's incredible. And I think it's a great place for where art can sort of fit in. The last thing that was kind of overlooked, I think, is that nature fluctuates with seasons, right? It's the winter time where daylight's going to fade. We are going a little bit more dormant. We're not quite as much outside in contact with nature. And that's, again, where nature-based art can absolutely serve us indoors, providing that sort of repeated imagery that is giving us all the wellness that I just kind of touched on. So yeah, I think a lot of opportunities for us to just weave in neuroaesthetics with any of the art that we're creating.
Roxanne, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Reviewing my notes, I was going to cite all the things Trisha cited. I love this concept of fractal fluency by Dr. Taylor. But I do have something I can add from my notes. A researcher, Pawlowski, who's in Europe, has coined the term tears and transformation. And he's studying people observing art in galleries and recording their responses. And it very much falls under that 15th pattern of awe.
Mhm.
And I just thought I mean, the direction that researchers are taking this is just fascinating to me. I'll add that citation at the end when I get it copy and paste it on my computer here.
Yeah, Anjan has also done studies at the art museums in the Philadelphia area, talking about how we need to slow down and not just walk through an art gallery, but to literally sit down and study the work of art for the 15 or 20 minutes. And he's been able to measure a lower heart rate, lower blood pressure as a result of that time. I'll also add something. The I work with a company, 3M, that has a software program called VAS, Visual Attention Software. And that software has the ability to predict where the unconscious mind will be attracted in the first 3 seconds of viewing something new. It's an incredibly powerful tool for interior designers. It's heavily used in packaged goods and website design right now, and it's hitting the design industry. It's a visual spell check is the way they think about it. So, and what they've been able to prove is that beautiful art, when put in a room, is what grabs the attention of the unconscious mind. So instead of looking at a front door or looking at other things in the room, a beautiful work of art is the thing that grabs the attention first. So just think about that, and I would encourage everyone to go ahead and look into that VAS software. They give you a free trial, so just Google up 3M VAS, VAS. All right, let's talk about the importance of color in art. Jenny, do you want to take that? And I want to keep us on time, so if we can do a summary of the answer to that, that would be great.
I think color, of course, you could have an entire semester of curriculum on color and color theory. And, Iris Apfel, she's a very well-known interior designer, that she's, one of her favorite quotes that I like is she says, nature is the best designer, because nature creates these perfect, effortless color combinations and textures. And not just blue, not just browns and greens necessarily, but many of the other colors, blues in particular. If you look at the color psychology behind blues, like Mike, your background, I just am so drawn to that because of those blue hues. It's giving me this sense of calmness and trust. A sense of just, I don't know, it makes me feel safe. And so those types, looking at the color psychology of, some of the colors that you want to include in your interiors can really have a huge impact. My artwork, just personally a lot of them are blues. My cyanotypes are an analog photography process that uses the sun to take the image rather than a camera. And they're all very much made from bluish tones, and some greens. There's also, neutrals, right? Neutrals, blacks, whites, grays that can be very soothing, particularly when they are reflecting natural textures and patterns, very much like some of what Trisha has behind her in her studio, in her artwork. So yeah, I would definitely, encourage you to look at some of the color psychology of your color. It's very interesting too. I was trying to find some research on that. Actually, Your Brain on Art, which is where I take much of my stuff, they don't really touch on that too much, but, oh yes. I see somebody just talked about Lori Weitzner's, piece. She does, yes, some wonderful stuff on the,
Yeah, her book is
the
called
art of
Ode to
color.
Color.
Yes.
Yeah. Roxanne, do you have something you want to add to this?
I just have a soapbox, and that is that there's more to life than brown and green. And I think biophilic design has kind of migrated towards those soft, calming colors because we do live in such a stressful world. But we also need spaces that energize us, that help us focus. Children, there is research in particular on children being more drawn and more activated positively by colorful art than muted gray toned art. I read a piece that I posted on LinkedIn last week on minimalism is not a style. It's a essential ingredient, and it was developed in the 1930s for health reasons, for hygiene. So a lot of people who are working in healthcare have restrictions on what kinds of colors, textures, materials they can use. And having art that is colorful allows you to have the cleanable surfaces and backgrounds. So we're just sort of scratching the surface. Designers know about color. All of you here that are designers, you study color, you know far more than I do about it. But I just want to reinforce that all of our colors do come from nature. So there are
Yeah,
no bad colors.
yeah. The couple things here. I saw a chat post. Someone was asking about neurodivergence, and I want to remind everybody that our September webinar is with Kay Sargent, and she is a world-renowned specialist in neuro-inclusivity. So if you want to save your question for next month, I'm certain Kay will be able to answer that. So look, I'm trying to keep us on time and to allow us to have time for some Q&A. So I'm going to combine two questions here. And Trisha, this is for you. Is it smart for art to have context or meaning to a particular owner? And talk about how the cultural influences the art we choose. Is an Asian cultural interest the same as a European? And does this personal meaning and context change what art does to us? I know that's a lot to unpack, but
Yeah.
give it a shot if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to keep it short, sweet for us. So, okay, so I think, yeah, it is probably the most important, impactful decision that you can make as a designer, as an architect, as a homeowner to consider context with art. And in just kind of my exploration of research, I've found a couple different ways in which we can do that very easily and why it's important. So, first off, I loved this study that was done by Dr. Anjan Chaudhary's group. And basically, they were able to show how context can be incorporated into the art pieces that you are displaying. The study looked at simply adding a title to a piece, the maker's name, some type of description to an art piece, and they found that it drastically increased the amount of just appreciation for the art, the engagement with it. I think it's something to be said about how we display art in our spaces, whether it's community, it's hospitality, it's in our homes, and a very simple way to provide context to art. And they show that that was the strongest effect, even with people who had very little exposure to art, which kind of ties in with our cultures, right? Many of us growing up and in our childhoods and, the art that's around us affects the way that we engage with it. And I think providing a little bit of context to a piece that is on a wall can just make drastic changes to how people engage with it. So that's just one piece. The other that's a little closer to the way that I approach my work is the meaningfulness of context. And I think when we are, creating art for somebody specifically who's going to be living with it in a community, and we are using a little bit more intention with deciding where that art comes from and what it's going to reflect, again, I think it can have a huge impact on those who are engaging with it. So be more intentional about reflecting the demographics with that art piece, the wildlife, the plant life that is in that area, the culture, of the people that are going to be surrounding that piece of art. I think that we have the ability to stop people in their tracks. And if you think about the art that you normally engage with and what has really attracted your attention, it's probably the pieces that had a connection with you, right? It's something that maybe has reminded you of a memory or something in your personal story. And I think that is where art can absolutely help us, is really providing connection with the viewers. And then the last one that I'll just quickly touch on is actually from Erin Peavy. I admire her work deeply, but she is an architect, a researcher, and she really advocates for power of place. She is an expert in environmental psychology. So a lot of her work looks at how the environment shapes us. So one of the concepts that she has really mentioned in her work is sense of place. And I think the way that she's describing it, it's more of the built environment, but not necessarily focusing on art. However, me as an artist, hearing that concept, I immediately thought of how art can provide us that connection. She describes ambient belonging, which is basically how your environment signals that you belong there. And just think about that. You know, when we walk into a space, you either feel like you belong there or you don't, right? You're either attracted to it or you feel, that it's not comfortable. And I absolutely think that art on the walls and what we're displaying can provide that effect and offer us the same, level of support. So again, I think I'm going to let the girls touch on a little bit of the culture piece as well on this, but I did want to at least emphasize that we do need to be really intentional about the meaning in the art that we're displaying and making sure that we have a connection with our audience.
Okay.
And Roxanne.
All right. Well, listen, we've got about just 3 or 4 minutes, and I want to get to one question that is really, really important. And that is, this has been great knowledge for all of the audience, but what are some of the action steps that a designer can take to start using this knowledge? Bettina, we're going to miss you. Stay in touch, Bettina. Anyway, what are some of the action steps that that designers can take to learn, to start using this information? Roxanne, do you want to go?
I'll jump in. Sort of segueing from the last question, the art world itself can be a problem because a lot of people are intimidated by it. And so there are all kind of people that will tell you what's good art and bad art, and you need to kick them all to the curb and just find art that moves you. You will feel it in your body when a piece of art connects with you. And I put a link in the post, 5 myths about art collecting. Also, working with art consultants. We have some incredible art consultants in our overall biophilic design neuroaesthetic community who are using these principles to sell art to their clients, working with designers, collaborating on projects. And I was just going to invite any art consultants that are in the room, go ahead and drop your links in the chat. And then, of course, the most important part is to start the conversation with your client. How do they feel about art? How do they feel about making art? Do they want to play with music, with having an arts and crafts drawer in the living room that you're designing for them? All of this stuff of art itself and arts engagement, we keep going back and forth, but they're partners. They're necessary ingredients with each other. So there are a few ideas for people to get started with.
Yeah, I would like to piggyback on that another really important thing you could think about is actually incorporating art making spaces or creative spaces in your design plans. Some of I saw that, Mike, when you guys did the virtual home on the last
At market.
webinar and during the keynote, there were neural nooks and reading, little reading corners and such. Those you could also incorporate art making spaces in those. They're also a great place to place some art, but also just to be thinking about how you can make a little art studio, right? How, if your clients in particular are interested in it or in music, and how you can incorporate specific spaces just for that use. And that it could also encourage it, even if they, are maybe interested, but they don't know how to go about doing it, or if they're not sure, it's just to have that space where someone can go in their home and create is very powerful. And then they can just build from there. And, Roxanne, like you said, there are art consultants, as well as the 3 of us. We're very happy to talk to you guys and answer any questions about choosing art or where to start, I would love to, talk some more about
Yeah,
that with
for
all of you.
everybody listening, in our prep session, this was a pretty important point. Please feel free to reach out to Roxanne, Jenny, or Trisha. They love this subject. They love helping people, and they're happy to consult. So just keep that in mind. Before we go to the Q&A, I just want to, I'm realizing something on this call, and that is, first of all, the audience, the attendees are very active in the chat. So, I mean, it's been incredible, and I love it. Thank you for doing that. That makes for a great webinar. I also want to let you know that this subject matter of neuroaesthetics, biophilia, salutogenic design, and in this case, the art that is part of all of that, is absolutely exploding. 8 years ago, when I first started building science and design, I did a presentation at the Dallas Market Center. I had 15 people in the audience, and that was it. The guy that introduced me didn't get my name right. There were 241 registrants for this webinar today. That's what's happening. It is exploding. The other thing that I'm finding fascinating is that in our early webinars, we had mostly people from the States. And just in this webinar right now, we have Copenhagen, Germany, England, Trinidad, India, and I think I'm missing a couple. But I mean, it's phenomenal. So thank you for all of that. And are there any particular questions that you have that go beyond what we've already been discussing? Please put them in the chat.
While they're doing that, we are putting out links to our websites and PDFs that we've made for people to have access to a lot of the sources that we've cited today. So encourage you guys to connect with us offline. I'm also going to put a link to a survey that the Journal of Biophilic Design has open right now. They're really looking for designers who work in healthcare to fill out that survey. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat.
Thank you, Roxanne. And while we're waiting for any questions, I'll give my closing thoughts right now. But please feel free to add questions. We have another 8 or 9 minutes. Listen, all of us at Science and Design are seeing and feeling this momentum. You have to know that. The seismic shift is happening for the world of interior design. Dr. Douglas Wood of the Mayo Clinic, he runs the Center for Innovation, says the future of medicine is in the home, and it is in every room you will ever design. You prescribe health with the beauty that you create. And just as I mentioned when we first started, science has a term for you, and that is that you are an alternative health resource. We need the big challenge, though, is we need to own it. We need to start really believing it, internalizing it, because this is where the industry is headed. And, I'm glad that you're here, and I hope you can take the trip and take the journey with all of us. Do you think that artists should always have these considerations in mind when producing art?
No. I think that it's funny, I had such a strong reaction. So an artist has to create for what they're called to create. We're lucky nature calls us and we listen. And we are backed up by this huge body of neuroaesthetic research. But the moment an artist starts making something for some external goal, we encounter a slippery slope, in my opinion. And so I don't think we have to worry about that, because especially when we're concerned with nature, the 90% of the heavy lifting is done for us. In my work, I talk to the plants before I photograph them. Some days they don't want to put on a show for me, and I respect that. I wrote an editorial about that in the Journal of Biophilic Design. It's on my blog, but we have to start from within. Pardon?
Do they answer you?
Yes, they do. They definitely do. And forest bathing, learning to be a forest bathing guide, holy cow, I have conversations you wouldn't believe.
Well, it's funny because my wife also talks to all of our plants. I mean, I'm sitting here in an office that is filled with greenery, and she's the one that takes care of it. And whenever she comes in, she'll pat them on the head and she'll start talking to them. And she says it's what makes them grow.
Mhm.
Which industry is picking up on this movement now? Well, let
Say
me
that
tell you.
again. Oh,
On NeuroArts, definitely interior design. I think it's definitely starting to come into healthcare more now. Mike, you touched on that, but there is, social prescribing is becoming more prevalent, which is amazing.
And social prescribing, if I can interrupt just for a second, is all of the arts, all of the aesthetics. It's
Yes.
not just the visual. In England, I think we have somebody from England, but in England they call it social prescribing, and they teach people to sing. They make people listen to music and dance. And by the way, a lot of this is covered in Susan's book, Your Brain on Art. So just another thought.
Yes, and the Beckler Museum of Art in Charlotte, North Carolina has a art on prescription program that they just did a PBS segment on it that was really, really powerful in how they're using arts to help with loneliness and social isolation, which is really becoming, an epidemic level in our world right now. And so they're working with therapists and doctors who partner and make referrals of the patients to the program. And the museum, they get to have 1 year of free programming with the museum where they can learn how to make art, pottery. They can go into the museum and have conversations with some of the guides and talk about what colors or what shapes are moving them and what it is about the artwork that connects to them. And it's really helping people make social connections that way as well, as and so it's really powerful. I'm going to put a link to that as well, and with some of the other
Okay.
research.
And
So
I
yeah.
just saw a chat from someone, and I couldn't get the name, but from someone who's talking about low dimensional fractals and why they're going to be so important to his space. I'm thinking back 20 years ago. This is how fast this is moving. Nobody would have understood that whole comment about low dimensional fractals. Yet this is part of our lexicon today. And so again, I want to invite everybody to learn about this subject matter because this is the future of our industry. I have 12:59. If there are no other questions, I'm going to say thank you to all of the audience for showing up, for attending. A special thanks to Roxanne, Jenny, and Trisha. They put a lot of work into this. They met several times to make sure we had the answers for you. So please feel free to reach out to them. And I want to thank everyone. We're actually ending right on the button. How about that? So, and thank you. Thank you to everyone for your nice applause. And join us next month. And for heaven's sake, get certified. You have the extra incentive through the end of the month. Become one of these early adopters. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you so much.
thank you, everybody.
Thank
Great
you.
audience. You guys are
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you. I'm saving the chat. Give me a second, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jenna, how you liking the course so far? I just saw your chat note.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's great. It's been really great. My brain's exploding with all this new information and it's really cool. So I'm just loving it. I can't wait I've already been applying it as I can, but I can't wait to do more and more.
Great. Laura Lee, the discount code is S like in Sam or science, SID 100. All right. Did you get the chat, Roxanne?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you all.
I saved it about 10
You were
times.
great. What a great audience. My gosh. See you later. See you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.